Today we're discussing the Fuji X100VI. This is actually the first X100 series camera I've used, and I've got some interesting results to share about its sensor. Let's get undone.
Gerald Undone. He's crazy.
What's happening, everybody? I'm Gerald Undone, and I prefer my camera shaken, not stirred. So as usual, some disclosure. Fuji lent me this camera to make this review. I don't get to keep it, no money changed hands, and Fuji does not get any input on this video's production or get a preview before it's posted. This video does have an actual sponsor though, and that's Storyblocks. To manage expectations, I think it's important for me to indicate that this camera is not for me. It's just a preference thing, but this is not the style of body I gravitate to. And so I'm not going to spend too much time reviewing that side of it because my opinion would be warped. What I can say, however, is that it's surprisingly capable for its size. And despite my initial aversion toward it, I don't really have anything negative to say about it. It did well. Sure, there's a learning curve to this layout, and it can feel a bit cramped at times, but it's got everything you need, except for a fully articulating screen. So consider me cautiously impressed. Well, actually, there was one thing that irked me. Tripod plates are tedious on this camera. When you put one on, you can no longer open the battery door, which is also where your SD card is kept. So that's pretty annoying. Now, obviously, I have a whole bunch of nerdy sensor tests to report on, but first, I wanted to put this camera through its paces in a photography environment. So Patrick Tomaso and I took to the streets, and here's what we captured. People always ask me, why do you do it, man? And I don't say a word, because they wouldn't understand. I'm not just a photographer anymore. I'm more than that now. I don't take pictures for fun. I'm not trying to make art or capture beauty. I have a responsibility, and this responsibility transcends the conventions of photography we're being spoon-fed every day. I see things differently. I don't chase the light. I let the light chase me. I work with texture. I don't worry about composition or keeping things in focus. My only concern is showing you what it feels like to touch something with your eyes. Can you feel that? How about now? There's times where I can feel the shot so much, I don't even need to use my eyes anymore. At that point, looking just gets in the way. I don't like all the controls and dials on cameras these days. I shouldn't have to turn knobs to get the shot the way I want it. I don't work for the camera works for me. People like to refer to their camera as a tool. I don't buy into that. The camera is just an extension of me. I'm the tool. Sometimes I don't even take the photo. Sometimes it's just for me. A moment for just me to experience and hold on to. Other photographers will go on and on about how they're looking for interesting lines and angles. They're afraid. They're waiting for the angles to come to them. I create my own angles. Turn the level off. Let your imagination be your level, and the angles will come. I never use a zoom lens. I zoom with my mind. If you can't see where you're headed, how do you know when you're there? I photograph the streets as they are. I don't sugarcoat it. I let them speak for themselves. It's not my story to tell. I just try to encapsulate someone's memory of a town. A memory that's fading. Everything else is static. Big shout out to Patrick for filming that one. He's great. Now, one thing Fuji is known for is loading their cameras up with interesting film emulations to give your images those timeless Fujifilm looks. But all of the images you saw in our street photography film were actually edited using a new film emulation I developed. It's a bit of a more modern take on the Eterna stock. Let's call it Moderna. And it features a delightful infusion of purple into the shadows and some warm creamy tones in the highlights to balance it out, as well as a bunch of other adjustments to fully activate one's nostalgia. It comes in a few varieties and works as a simple Lightroom preset on your raw Fuji images. And best of all, we're selling the entire 5 preset pack at a massive discount for the viewers of this video. Just click the link in the description and elevate your images with the Moderna preset pack today. Results may be terrible. The product is real, but the entire concept is a joke. Consumer discretion is advised. Okay, let's get into that sensor testing, starting with rolling shutter. Let's start here in the 6.2K mode. Now, the camera can go up to 30 frames per second in 6K and then up to 60 frames per second in 4K, but there is a change to the processing and pipeline in that case. So in 6K 24, we're getting a rolling shutter of 24.6 milliseconds, which is not good. That is pretty jello-y. Ideally, I'd say we want to hit 15 milliseconds and lower, and ideally single digits. If we move on to the 4K 24 HQ, 24.7, it's the same. That's just a small variance in the measuring. Basically, the 4K HQ mode is taking that 6.2K readout and then oversampling it down to a 4K image. So it should read out at exactly the same speed because it's fundamentally the same capture. There's a 4K 24 mode where you turn off the HQ, so you're no longer oversampling. And when we get into the dynamic range section, this will make a little bit more sense, but the readout speed improves dramatically to 15.3, which is right around that pass mark that I was talking about. And then in 4K 60, it improves a little bit more to 13.4 milliseconds. Now, I do want to show you this crop factor diagram that I made to better explain what's going on. The purple frame that is on the top and the bottom, that is a 3:2 image. That's if you're taking stills, that's your total sensor, which is 40 megapixels. If you shoot in that 16:9 4K non-HQ mode, you actually get the full width of the sensor, even though it's the one that reads out faster. So you can see you won't get the top and bottom because 16:9 isn't as tall as 3:2, but you do get the full width. However, if you switch to 4K 24 with HQ turned on, so that oversampled mode, or if you shoot in 6.2K mode, because again, they're both the same, you get this middle orange box, losing width and height. My theory as to why this is just has to do with the processing capabilities of the camera. If they were to try and do a 40 megapixel oversample, it just wouldn't be able to handle it. So they figured, okay, well, what window would give us a nice 6K image? Let's window a 6K image, and then we can oversample from there. And windowing in, obviously, is a crop in, so you do lose some from the sides. The 4K 60 is based on the non-HQ, and so it's just sort of a 4K 60 crop in. So the dynamic range and other aspects of the 4K 60 are more closely representative of the 4K non-HQ, where the 6K and 4K HQ will have dynamic range benefits, but you're giving up a lot more of the frame. Hopefully that is helpful and illustrates it a little bit better. Okay, next up is dynamic range, but first, a quick word from the sponsor of today's video, Storyblocks. If you're not familiar, Storyblocks is a stock media platform that offers unlimited downloads of diverse and high-quality content for one predictable subscription cost. No more expensive pay-per-clip pricing. Just pick a plan, pay that fee, and that's it. And you'll enjoy a library of over 1 million HD and 4K video files, images, and motion graphics templates. And speaking of those graphics, Storyblocks has expanded their library beyond just Premiere Pro and After Effects, and now includes customizable DaVinci Resolve templates for motion graphics and animated sequences, an essential tool for creating professional-looking videos at scale. And it's always easy to find what you're looking for in Storyblocks because the platform is very intuitive, and new content is commissioned frequently to ensure you'll have fresh assets to satisfy your project. And on top of all that, Storyblocks has a special offer just for my audience. For a limited time, you'll get 3 additional months free if you sign up with an annual plan. Just go to storyblocks.com/undone or click the link in the description to take advantage of this exclusive offer, only available until the end of April 2024. The offer won't appear at checkout, but rest assured, it will be automatically added to your account shortly after you sign up. Thanks for listening. Now let's talk dynamic range. Okay, so we got the dynamic range test results here. This is Imatest. Now, if you've never seen a dynamic range test result before, I'll explain quickly how it works. You take a chart called the Xyla 21. It actually looks a lot like my t-shirt, shameless plug. If you're into this kind of nerdy dynamic range stuff, you can get this shirt, link in description. I think it's a lot of fun. But picture a chart like this that goes to 21 stops instead of the 14 that you see here on the shirt, although 14 is probably adequate for most of the cameras we test. Here, we process that image through Imatest, which is based on MATLAB, and it gives us a score that we can use to compare the different profiles and stuff like that. So at the top here, you'll see what we actually shot. In this case, it's 6K 24, and by on 6K, I mean it was put on a 6K timeline and an F-Log2. So we're seeing, in a way, the worst, but also the best. We're using F-Log2, but we're just doing 6K and a 6K timeline, so no oversampling, noise reduction, all that stuff is all turned off, down to -4, etc. And when we do that, the camera can see a total of 14.7 stops. That's the slope-based DR. That's how many stops total. And then below that, we have different levels of noise tolerance. Normally, we go with the medium, which is a signal noise ratio of 2, that's a good level of pretty clean. How many stops are pretty clean? And in that, we get 11.2, which isn't bad. I did a whole video on the XH2S, which is I would say comparable when looking at F-Log2. Because we have 14.7 stops, there's plenty of room to do noise reduction in post. And generally, these Fuji sensors do really well with noise reduction in post. Now, you can do noise reduction in camera, and it does okay, but I would rather shoot like this, 6K, turn all the noise reduction off, do it in post, and you'll get a really, really nice image. Now, if we drop it on a 4K timeline, I was surprised to see that the medium score didn't actually go up that much. It's still 11.2. We did get a small bump up to 14.9, but you're not getting a whole lot of, oversampling benefits by shooting in 6K and dropping it on a 4K timeline when it comes to the clean medium score. However, if we look at 4K 24 HQ, which is the one that's oversampled in camera, so the file that comes out is 4K, but it took from the 6K, the medium score actually goes down to 10.9 and 14.4, which means that you're better off doing the oversampling yourself by shooting 6K than you are letting the camera do it internally, which is interesting. F-Log1 has a lower total amount of stops, only 13.6, but the stops that you get out of it are cleaner. So you get 11.8 right out of the gate, but you can only get to a maximum of 13.6. So this is probably better if you want to do less post-production, but if you plan on, I'll clean it up, I want to get the most I can get out of it, then you should shoot F-Log2 because you have a higher ceiling for where noise reduction can take you. And speaking of that, let's look at the noise reduction in the camera. So if we put the noise reduction back to 0 and turn the interframe to auto, which is the out-of-box settings, then you get an 11.9 on your F-Log2. And this is the reason why I don't recommend doing this. You are baking in that noise reduction into your image, and you're only really getting 3/4 to maybe a full stop with that aggressive noise reduction. So I think you're better off turning that off, and you can probably get yourself like a stop and a half or 2 stops. I was able to do that on the XH2S, and I feel like you'd be able to do it here as well by doing the noise reduction yourself. Now, if we compare it to the 4K 24 in F-Log2, you'll see something very interesting, which is that the slope-based DR drops to 12.4, and both the low and the medium are also 12.4. Now, anytime I've ever seen this happen, and it also explains why the readout speed is better in this mode, it's usually because the bit depth has been lowered. My guess would be that they went from a 14-bit down to a 12-bit. When you do that, you read out faster, and obviously they're not oversampling as well. So you stop oversampling and you lower the bit depth, and that explains how they're able to go from 25 milliseconds down to 15 milliseconds by turning off HQ. And it may seem like, 12.4, that's better. But what's happening is the whole image is kind of being pushed down. And so the noise floor is being buried, but your ceiling is also limited. So whatever you see when looking at this shot, that's the best it's ever going to be. It can never kind of get better than that. And same is true if you look at F-Log1, 12.2, 12.2. So really there's not much difference in F-Log1 and F-Log2 when shooting in the non-HQ modes because it's bit depth limited anyway. So you're just going to get a 12 max stops, which maybe that's okay. Maybe you want a fast readout. You're okay with 12 stops. You don't want to do any post-production. Then just go with that and you're fine. It doesn't matter whether you do F-Log1 or F-Log2 really. And then I have a 4K 60 here as well. 4K 60 and F-Log2 still has that bit depth limited thing where it's not going to go above 12.5 stops, but the medium score isn't 12.5 anymore. Now it's 11.9. So the 4K 60 is the worst of all of them. It's about half a stop worse than even the bit depth limited 4K 24. And that makes sense. It's also the one with the fastest readout speed. So it's all very logical, which I like to see. It makes sense. The camera makes sense. You're trading off dynamic range for readout speed. I like it when it operates like that. Works well for my brain. Now, there is one other thing that I wanted to mention and praise about this camera, which is the UVC webcam functionality. I only just recently learned that all of the Fuji cameras of this 5th generation, so this camera, the X-T5, and I think a couple others, have the ability to operate as a webcam or direct streaming device over USB. It's very well implemented, and the fact that this camera lets you disable oversampling means that you get much longer runtimes while streaming compared to some competing products. I actually just made a whole video about my overheating experiences with UVC webcams last week, and in that context, this Fuji held up well. Anyway, that's it. Like I said in the beginning, I'm not going to make any overarching opinions on this camera because it's not for me, but I did enjoy my time with it, and I hope this video was helpful. All right, I'm done.